Okay, students, so we are moving on to chapter 8 of Slavin, where we'll be looking at student-centered and constructivist approaches to instruction. Previously in chapter 7, we dealt with direct instruction and discussion methods and how students can learn and transfer concepts. So now we go now deeper into the teaching pedagogies and different approaches to teaching. So whereas the first approach, when the direct instruction, is a teacher-centered approach because it's mainly focused on what the teacher does to encourage learning or to ensure that learning takes place. This approach in chapter 8 is looking at student-centered and constructivist approaches where the onus is more on the students to engage and to construct their own learning, and the teacher acts more as a facilitator. So let's see how this lesson is broken down. Let's see what our goals and objectives are vis-a-vis via the questions that are stated. So organizing questions for this lecture would be, what is the constructivist view of learning? And in terms of a type of constructivism, like cooperative learning, how does cooperative learning take place? And how can students use problem solving and thinking skills to learn, and how these strategies can be taught to students? So let's begin with, what is the constructivist view of learning? Well, the constructivist view, as you would imagine, is that learners are actively involved in discovering and transforming their learning, their information, and making it their own. So when you take up a textbook and you begin to read and you try to understand and you do additional research and you construct your own meaning, when I speak and you try to put it over in your own words, or you try to internalize it and you ask a question and you say, so did you mean so and so and so, or is it like this or that? You are actually constructing your own understanding and you own that learning. Constructivist views also emphasize a top-down approach where students can begin with problems, with complex problems, and then delve into those complex problems and go right down to the basic knowledge and skills that one would require to solve those complex problems. For example, students might say, well, you know, there is the environmental issue of global warming. What can we do as individuals to slow down global warming? And how can it be done? And so the students will understand what global warming is, what causes global warming, and what factors cause global warming, and what citizens might be able to do, or individuals might be able to do to prevent global warming from taking place by changing their behaviors and changing their actions. And that will bring it right down to the basic actions that must or must not be done to prevent global warming. Constructivist approaches include cooperative learning, discovery learning, questioning or inquiry strategies, and other forms of metacognitive skills where the student is directly engaged in his understanding. What about the truth? Where does it come from? The two men you see on your screen, the one on your left would be the older looking gentleman, is Jean Piaget, and you would have heard of him. And the other guy, the younger looking guy, is Vygotsky. And of course, Piaget is the main proponent of cognitive development through learning. And we learned that Piaget discovered a system where students organize their learning through adaptation, and adaptation can be broken down into assimilation and accommodation. And through these mechanisms, children and individuals learn, and they move from one stage to the other. You know, it starts with the sensory motor stage and the pre-operational stage and the concrete operational stage, and then the formal operational stage. Whereas Vygotsky emphasizes more social constructivist, social cognitive view of learning, where he believes that learning must take place as a means of interchange, interaction between individuals, between the teacher and the students, between a more knowledgeable learner and a less knowledgeable learner, using that individual's zone of proximal development. So as we said, constructivist theories support classroom instruction methods and emphasize cooperative learning, project-based learning, and discovery learning. And of course, both of these concepts emphasize the whole notion of disequilibrium and how individuals go into disequilibrium when they're presented with information or presented with situations or circumstances that they don't understand. And when they go through the process of learning, they come back to equilibrium. And through that process, they acquire new knowledge. Again, it's a top-down approach. It's top-down processing, where the students can be given with a complex problem and then work to solve that complex problem by the acquisition of more basic skills. So the example is given that students might be taught to write comprehension. Students might be asked to write a composition. And then after they've been given enough exercise of writing composition, then the teacher might break it down and talk to them about formulating paragraphs, developing topic sentences, developing supporting sentences, developing transitional sentences, using descriptive words, using accurate spelling and grammar and punctuation, etc. So they can begin very complex and then come down to the fundamentals. I say a comprehension would be the overarching goal. And before that, when you go lower down, it would be processing phrases, processing words, processing letters, processing features that shape with that formulate letters, etc. The bottom up goes in the opposite direction. Of course, during these learning processes, peer interaction is emphasized, and peer interaction is important among students of any age in constructivist learning. And this approach helps students to learn from each other and to be able to have their knowledge tested, to be able to have to explain what they're learning, and more difficult concepts can be broken down as they talk to each other and help each other solve problems. Peer interaction also involves peer modeling appropriate ways of thinking, exposing and challenging each other's misconceptions. So when they interact with one another as peers, when that learning process, so if you come together as a group and you're trying to learn some concept and somebody says, no, I don't believe it is this, I think it is that, bring the evidence to show, and you have your counter argument, they're going back and forth. Through that process of peer interaction, good quality learning takes place. Also, discovery learning is another mechanism of the constructivist approaches, where students are presented with knowledge that they should acquire, and so the teacher plays a role of facilitator. And so the information is presented there, or the tools, or whatever concepts are presented in whatever form, and then the students must go about discovering. So for example, you can have seeds to be germinated in different environments, with water, without water, in light, without light, and at different stages of a period of time. And you can ask students to record what is taking place. Why did the seed in this position under these conditions sprout and germinate and the others didn't? What is required for the germination of a seed? And so they would do comparison and contrast with the additional research and find out what conditions are necessary for the germination of a seed. And in that way, they have discovered learning for themselves. So teachers also encourage students to do experiments, to conduct experiments, and allow them to discover the principles for themselves. This discovery learning often requires some level of self-regulated learning. And the self-regulated learner is a learner who knows how to use learning strategies effectively and when to use them. This young boy out here doing some looking to do some sewing for himself. So, and he's outlining everything. He's more or less being self-directed. So the self-regulated learner knows how to break up the complex problem into simpler steps, how to test out different solutions to identify which one works best. When they would know when they're required to do research to deepen their understanding, how to write to persuade, and how to write to inform. Of course, it will vary according to the student's age as well. In constructivist approaches to learning, scaffolding is important, and this was emphasized by Vygotsky, where individuals are given the required support to assist in their learning. So according to Vygotsky, higher mental functions include the ability to direct memory and attention in a purposeful way and to think in symbols that are mediated by behavior. So the individual is able to focus, is able to pay attention to what is important, to follow through on what is required. And they would need the support of the teacher to guide, to help them to master and internalize the skills that will help them to move on to the next level. So scaffolding is important. It is not taking over and doing the activity for the student, but it is giving a guide and the support that is required, asking them the required questions, them to think in a particular way, giving them the guidance, say, should you pursue that? Don't you think you should? Why do you believe this is so? Constructivist methods can be used in various content areas, whether it's math, writing, science, and two approaches. One can be reciprocal teaching, which is a very effective approach for learning, where students are placed into small groups and they model the different types of questions they should ask while reading. So a reciprocal teaching strategy can begin with they sit in a group and they begin by summarizing what they have been given to read or to learn. They help them to teach them how to generate questions, what, when, why, how. Then students would read and try to clarify, get information, clarify the vocabulary, clarify the understanding of what they're reading, and then see if they can create links and predict, make connections in the material and predict how the information can be used and what is the value of the information that they would have studied. Students can also be taught to question the author by helping them to see that the author presents factual material that is real, and they can have a dialogue with the authors. And so they look at the authors as if, okay, what are you presenting here? Why do you say this? Why do you say that? How can you defend your point? I think differently. And so questioning the author is an approach that teachers can help students to delve and go deeper into different topics. Research on constructivist methods have been very diverse, and outcomes have been qualitatively different from each other. More research is needed to determine when constructive approaches are most effective for enhancing achievement. Cooperative learning instruction, how is it used in teaching? It is used for discovery learning, it is used for discussion, it is used for when you're studying for assessment. And how does it organize? You organize students in groups of 4 to 6 persons, and each person plays a particular role. For example, the START approach is successful because you get rewards about the group and the individual level for improvement, because the group becomes responsible for individual members of each group. So while you're studying as a group, students will get marks for the entire group mark. You'll get individual marks and you'll get marks when the entire group performs well. So if you have a cooperative group operating with students of different abilities, different genders, different levels, you don't only ask the brightest student, or you only ask one student to present on behalf of the group. You question any member of the group. So the group must ensure that each member has the same, basically the same level of knowledge. So that's how the cooperative learning group works. You have a timekeeper, you have a questioner, you have somebody who's doing research. Different persons play different roles and the roles can be rotated. So each person is valued in the group because each person has to contribute to the overall best performance of the group. So cooperative learning methods include peer-assisted learning, where they work in groups, mixed ability groups or in dyads, and of varying sizes. Typically, students will be assigned to a cooperative group, may work on a project, and they work for many weeks or months together. The important skills that is required for the group would be listening skills, being able to give good explanations from research, being able to include other persons, avoiding putting down or making snide comments or making individuals feel that their contribution is not quality. So if you look at the diagram that we have to this side, we put the spotlight on this diagram. Positive interdependence, that they're depending on each other. Individual accountability, each person is accountable for himself as well as other members of the group. Interaction must always be promoted. Conflict management must be dealt with. Any conflict in the group must be properly managed. And the group processes must be observed. So by time management and goal setting, etc., are achieved. Research on cooperative learning. Group study methods are primarily used to when students work together to help one another master a relatively well-defined body of information. So they can use a project-based learning approach or active learning, where they involve in creating a report together, doing some sort of experiment, gathering information, doing a mural or some other major project where the individual members of the group all contribute to the same outcome. Studies of cooperative learning show that we must incorporate goals and individual accountability, show substantial positive effects on achievement for students in grades 2 through to 12. So cooperative learning groups do indeed work. What about problem solving and thinking skills? How are they taught? Students need to be able to use information and skills to solve problems. They might be good at adding, subtracting, multiplying, and have a little idea of how to solve a word or story problem in math. So, and the example is given there. So they should be able to have a clear approach in their mind, defining the problem, of how to approach and attack problems, defining the problem, generating new ideas, evaluating and selecting solutions, implementing those solutions, and then seeing how well they work. Okay. Otherwise, there's the ideal approach, where the problem is identified, the goals are defined in terms of how the problem is represented. Various strategies are brought up and explored, and the anticipated outcomes are identified, and then action is taken. And then the L will be looking back and learning and seeing, okay, what do we need to change? If the problem is not solved, how do we need to solve it? Teaching creative problem solving is a little different, because creative problem solving takes a little more time. So incubation, letting the thing gel in the individual's mind, they're thinking about it over a period of time. And of course, judgment is suspended, not rushing to come to a conclusion. The climate must be conducive for that level of experimentation and exploration. Proper analysis of the problem must take place in order to approach it. A wide range of minds, a lot of brainstorming, then application of thinking skills, writing it out, drawing, getting feedback from knowledgeable individuals in terms of what can work, how it can do in research and so on. And that is the kind of environment to do creative problem solving. Teaching thinking skills. Thinking skills would include planning, classifying, divergent thinking, which is thinking outside the box, identifying assumptions, recognizing misleading information, and generating kind of like critical thinking skills. And thinking skill can be taught through creating a culture of thinking in the classroom. So help students to not just jump to conclusion, not just accept everything, but have a proper orientation, preparation, analysis, hypothesize, verify allow information to be incubated, synthesize information, then verification of processes. So this little diagram here is a beautiful diagram that identifies some critical areas, having a proper orientation to the problem, having good preparation, doing proper analysis, hypothesizing about it, then letting it gel, letting it marinate, so to speak, in the mind. And that's the incubation period. Then coming up with synthesizing the problem, coming with bringing together all the different ideas from different perspectives and seeing what might be the best way to put it together for it to work. And then you go through a verification exercise where it is things are implemented and you verify whether they work. Critical thinking. One of the key objectives of school is to enhance students' ability to think critically and to make rational decisions about what they do or believe. And for critical thinking, students must be able to identify that which is misleading in advertisements. Not because you wear Michael Jordan sneakers will make you play basketball like him. Not because you put on a perfume that you see a guy is wearing with all these beautiful models and then coming to him means that you will attract all these lovely ladies because you wear a particular perfume. Not because you drink Coca-Cola, you'd be loved by everyone, etc. So identify misleading advertisements, weighing competing evidence, comparing and contrasting information, identifying assumptions and fallacies in arguments. As with any other objectives, objective critical thinking requires practice. So students must be allowed the time and space to think critically, given passages of scripture, given these strategies to approach critical thinking. Help them to think outside the box, to help them to think in a particular way. Force them to not just accept conclusions or assumptions or information without verifying that information. So it helps them to develop a healthy skepticism. And through that verification process is where they would not just accept any and everything on social media, not just being the great, what do you call this, people who always come up with these real contrary views, and they think that these COVID-19, if COVID-19 has taught us one thing, is that there are many persons who come up with all kinds of unscientific views about life, about who intends to do what, about different phenomena. There are many conspiracy theorists. Critical thinking is not to develop conspiracy theorists, but help students to question what they are taught and what they should accept and should not accept. Okay. Okay. So let's just go back over key areas. Back to the top to see what we would have covered. Right, so we looked at the organizing questions. Our goals was to identify what are the constructivist views on learning. How is cooperative learning used in instruction? And the whole knowledge of problem solving and thinking skills, how they can be taught to students. So those are the main areas that we covered today in this lecture on chapter 8, student-centered and constructivist approaches to instruction. So thank you once again. Thank you very much. So you can make your key points and come to the class and any of the 2 lectures and identify those areas that stood out for you or any area that you want to get further clarification on, you have a question or so. Remember also, you still have to read your chapter and make your notes on your key terms. Thank you very much.